What makes a family? Is it blood? A last name? A shared address? Or is it something quieter, like the sound of someone staying when everyone else walks away? This is the story of a little boy who lost everything: his parents, his home, even his voice, and the man who gave it all back, not with grand gestures, but with patience, kindness, and the kind of love this world often forgets. It's a story about the power of showing up, about how one broken man gave a broken child something priceless: the feeling of being seen. If you've ever believed that love can heal, that quiet kindness matters, or that family is something we create, this story is for you. Come closer. This one stays with you. Lucas was 5 years old the day the world stopped making sense. He had been riding in the back seat, legs swinging and fingers sticky with juice, singing along to a silly radio jingle his dad loved to hum. The sun poured in through the windows like golden syrup. His mum was laughing, really laughing, at something his dad said. Lucas didn't even catch the words. He was too busy soaking in the moment, in the warmth, in the safety. Then came the scream of tires, the sound of metal twisting, and after that, only darkness. When Lucas woke up in the hospital, the room smelled like plastic and bleach. His tiny body was riddled with scratches and a hairline fracture on his wrist, now wrapped tightly in a cast. Nurses fluttered in and out with gentle smiles and 2 cheerful voices, calling him sweetheart and brave boy. But their eyes were too full of pity to be comforting. No one would tell him where his parents were. Until the woman came. She was in her 30s, dressed in a tasteful black suit and a string of fake pearls that glinted beneath the fluorescent light. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were red, as if she'd practiced looking devastated in the car before walking in. "Lucas," she whispered, crouching beside his bed. "It's me, Aunt Clarice." He blinked at her. Vaguely, he remembered seeing her once a year at Thanksgiving, when she and Mommy always exchanged stiff hugs and talked in polite voices. She had never knelt before him, never looked him in the eye like this. "Your Mommy and Daddy." "They're not coming back, sweetheart," she said, voice cracking in all the right places. Lucas didn't say anything. His throat had closed up like a fist. But Clarice continued, brushing her fingers through his curls, as if she had any right. "Don't you worry, baby. I'm going to take care of you now. Just like I promised your mama. You'll live with me. I'll be your family." He nodded. Because what else could a 5-year-old do? The first days at Clarice's house were strange. The townhouse was full of expensive things: glass tables, white carpets, sharp edges. Lucas wasn't allowed to touch anything. He tried to be quiet, sat in corners, colored with broken crayons someone found in a drawer. But everything he did seemed to make Clarice sigh. "Don't drag your feet, Lucas. Don't speak with your mouth full. For God's sake, don't wipe your nose on your sleeve." At night, he was given a fold-out cot in the laundry room. The first time he cried softly into his pillow, Clarice opened the door, flicked on the light and snapped, "You're not the only one who's grieving, you know. Stop making everything about you." Lucas bit his tongue, said nothing, just hugged his only photo of Mom and Dad tighter. Within a week, Clarice had sold his parents' house. "Oh, don't look at me like that," she said when he asked why. "I can't keep up with mortgage payments on a dead couple's fantasy." That place was falling apart anyway. She sold the car next, then drained the insurance account. "Do you know how exhausting it is to handle everything alone?" she snapped one evening, downing half a glass of wine. "Lawyers, paperwork, social workers breathing down my neck. I didn't ask for this." Lucas stood in the hallway in his pajamas, his small frame nearly swallowed by the shadows. "I didn't ask for it either," he whispered. She didn't hear him, or she pretended not to. 3 weeks in, the mask slipped completely. Clarice was on the phone, pacing in the kitchen, not knowing Lucas was sitting under the counter, building a tower out of sugar packets. "No, I haven't spent all of it yet, but don't rush me. The kid is still here. I can't exactly ship him off and look like a monster. There's paperwork. Yes, I know what I'm doing." Lucas didn't move, didn't breathe. His fingers trembled over a packet of Splendor. Later that night, she burned dinner. When Lucas offered to help, she exploded. "You are not my responsibility," she shouted. "Do you get that? I had a life before you. Now it's meetings, messes, and macaroni every damn night." Lucas flinched. "But you said you'd take care of me." Clarice laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "I said that to get custody, Lucas. Wake up." And just like that, whatever light was left in him dimmed. The next morning, he found his backpack packed, his clothes stuffed inside carelessly, his photo of Mom and Dad bent at the corner. "We're going for a drive," Clarice said curtly. "Where?" he asked. "Somewhere with people trained to deal with situations like this." They drove in silence. No radio, no music, just the hum of tires and the smell of her perfume, too sharp in the closed car. After nearly 2 hours, they pulled up to a grey building surrounded by chain-link fences and dead grass. The sign out front read, "Meadow Hills Youth Home." It didn't look like a home. Clarice stepped out, heels clicking on the pavement. She didn't open the door for Lucas. He climbed out slowly, dragging his backpack behind him. "Is this school?" he asked. She rolled her eyes. "It's where you're going to stay for a while, until things settle. But can I come back to your house later?" Clarice leaned down, fake smile stretched too thin. "Listen to me, Lucas. You're 5. You don't get to make decisions. Be grateful I didn't just drop you in foster care 2 weeks ago." The first thing Lucas noticed was the smell. It wasn't just the sour tang of unwashed sheets or the musty odor of old walls. It was something worse. Something that clung to the air like mildew on a soaked towel. Fear. It was in the hushed voices, in the way the children avoided eye contact, in the silence that followed every adult's footsteps. Meadow Hills. Youth home wasn't a home. It was a cage. At the front desk stood a woman with steel-grey hair pinned in a tight bun, a pearl brooch on her blazer, and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Veronica Bloom," she said, extending a manicured hand to the social worker who dropped Lucas off. "I run this center." Lucas, clutching his backpack, looked up at her. She bent slightly, her voice sweet and slow, like syrup dripping from a spoon. "And you must be Lucas." What a precious little boy. But her eyes were scanning, not his face, his shoes, his bag, the condition of his clothes, evaluating him, not welcoming. Lucas managed a nod. Clarice handed over the paperwork with a swift, businesslike motion, not bothering to read it over. She barely looked at the woman receiving it, just signed where she needed to, shoved the folder across the desk, and muttered, "Everything's in there." Lucas stood beside her, clutching his backpack, eyes darting between the grown-ups. He reached for her sleeve, his small fingers brushing the fabric. "Can you stay?" "Just for a little bit." Clarice stepped back, like he'd spilled something on her. "Lucas," she said sharply, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." He opened his mouth to beg her not to leave him here, to ask if he'd done something wrong, but the words caught like thorns in his throat. Without another glance, Clarice turned on her heels and walked out. She didn't look back. The woman turned to him again with that same rehearsed smile. "We're so glad to have you, Lucas. I just know you'll fit in beautifully." Room 7 was a concrete box with flickering lights, and a cracked window sealed shut with duct tape. There were 7 children already crammed into the space, most of them between 5 and 10. 2 bunk beds, 1 broken cot, and a corner with a thin mat. "You'll sleep there," said a tired teenage staff member, pointing to the corner. Lucas dropped his bag, hugged his photo tighter, and sat down on the mat. It felt like the floor of a basement. No one spoke to him that first night. He woke up the next morning to shouting, "Up! Everyone up! We're behind schedule!" It was Veronica's voice, commanding and sharp like a whip crack. She had ditched the sweet tone. Now she was someone else entirely. Lucas scrambled to his feet. A bigger boy beside him whispered quickly, "Hurry! Make your bed neat, or she'll make you redo it 10 times. "But I don't have a bed," Lucas said quietly. "Then make the floor." Before he could even process that, a clipboard was shoved into his chest. "You'll be helping in Laundry C today," barked an older woman named Doris. "You know how to fold shirts?" Lucas blinked. I'm 5. "Great," she said flatly. "You'll learn fast." From that day on, Lucas's life became a blur of endless chores and punishments. He swept hallways, scrubbed toilets, rinsed dish trays, sorted donated clothes, and carried crates of canned goods down to the basement. There were no classes, no books, no learning. Once he asked if he could go to school. Veronica had smiled in front of donors during a photo op and replied, "Of course, sweetie, education is so important." But after the cameras left, she hissed, "You'll learn how to mop a floor before you learn your ABCs." Food was rationed. Dinner was often watery soup and a dry slice of bread. Seconds were forbidden. Complaints earned kitchen duty or worse. When Lucas spilled water during lunch one day, a staff member grabbed his arm roughly. "You trying to make us slip and break our necks?" the woman snapped. "You little brat!" She dragged him by the wrist to the hallway and made him scrub scuff marks off the wall with a toothbrush. He did it in silence. The next day, his toothbrush was gone. No one gave him a new one. Veronica ran Meadow Hills like a factory, not a refuge. Donations came in weekly, boxes of clothes, books, food, toys, but the children rarely saw any of it. "Don't touch the donation boxes," a staffer warned. "They're being processed." Processed meant sorted, resold, and pocketed by Veronica. She often hosted charity dinners at fancy restaurants, painting herself as a champion for forgotten youth. Lucas once saw a newspaper photo of her shaking hands with the mayor. She wore a bright pink blazer and a smile so wide it made him feel sick. He wanted to scream. Punishments were swift, cruel, and always public. Kids who misbehaved were forced to eat alone facing a wall. Others were locked in the quiet room, a storage closet with no windows. Screaming from inside was ignored. Lucas once saw a boy named Jamie locked in there for 2 days after breaking a broom handle by accident. "I didn't mean to," Jamie sobbed when they let him out. "It was old. They said I should have been more careful." After that, Lucas learned to move like a shadow. No noise, no mess, no mistakes. But even then, Veronica found reasons to punish. Lucas was mopping the main hallway one afternoon when she came storming through in heels, talking loudly on the phone. When she slipped slightly on the still wet floor, she spun on him with a venomous glare. "What are you, stupid? You didn't put up a warning sign." I wasn't given one," Lucas started. Slap. The sound echoed down the hallway. His cheek burned, his eyes welled, but he didn't cry. He looked up at her and said nothing. That made her angrier. "Clean this again," she hissed. "And next time you trip me, I'll have you scrubbing toilets for a month." That night, Lucas lay on his mat, blanket pulled over his head, listening to the sounds of the others breathing. One boy coughed all night. No one checked on him. He stared at the faded photograph of his parents under the weak glow of the hallway light that leaked through the crack in the door. I miss you, he whispered. I don't think I can do this much longer. But they didn't answer. Only the wind outside replied, soft and cold, like the floor beneath him. Lucas was beginning to understand something terrible. It wasn't just that Clarice didn't want him. It was that no one here did. Not Veronica, not the staff, not even the system. He was 5 years old and already invisible. Lucas first saw the man on a Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting cross-legged on the front steps of Meadow Hills, a canvas tote at his side and a gentle smile on his weathered face. His grey cardigan was patched at the elbows, his jeans were worn thin at the knees, and his shoes had clearly seen better decades. He looked more like someone waiting for a bus than a man about to change a child's life. In his lap, he held a tin. From it, he pulled out pieces of cookies, broken, uneven, some with jagged edges. He wrapped 3 of them in a napkin, folded it carefully, and handed them to a girl, no older than 8. For you, he said softly. 1 for each of your braids. She giggled, then darted back through the fence, hiding the cookies like treasure. Lucas watched the whole thing from behind the curtains of the common room. There was something oddly calming about the man, like he didn't belong to the same world as Veronica or the silent, bitter staff. He looked kind. That night, Lucas asked the older boy in room 7, "Who's that man with the cookies?" "Oh, him?" the boy said. "That's Mr. Raymond. He comes here a lot. Nobody knows why." Raymond started showing up twice a week, usually Tuesdays and Saturdays. He always brought something with him. Sometimes it was a paper bag filled with overripe bananas and small apples that were bruised but still sweet. Other times it was a cardboard box with old toys he'd fixed, a doll with new button eyes, a puzzle with hand-cut replacement pieces, a remote control car with mismatched wheels that still zoomed. The kids loved him. They ran to the gate when they saw him. They whispered jokes and held up drawings they'd made just for him. They didn't care that his sweaters were ragged or his beard was uneven. To them, he was magic. Quiet magic. But Veronica hated him. "You again?" she snapped one morning as he arrived with a small cooler. "What is it this time? Expired yogurt? A bag of dented cans you fished out from behind a discount store?" Raymond smiled, soft, unfazed. "Strawberries today. They were going to be thrown out." "Perfectly good." She crossed her arms, voice dripping with disdain. "You think these kids need sympathy wrapped in plastic wrap? They need discipline, order. A future they need strawberries," he replied simply. Veronica's face tightened. "You're not allowed inside during operating hours. You know the policy." He nodded. "So I'll wait here." And he did, for hours, sometimes under the rain, sometimes in the heat, never complaining. One Thursday, Lucas was assigned to clean the front hallway. Through the cracked window, he saw Raymond sitting under the big maple tree with a group of toddlers. He was carving something out of wood with a pocket knife, careful, slow, precise. Veronica came storming out, heels snapping on the pavement. "What are you doing now, whittling weapons?" "It's a duck," Raymond replied. "A duck?" "For Kayla. She said she misses the farm she used to live on." Veronica snorted. "These kids will forget farms, ducks, and you soon enough. You're wasting your time." Raymond didn't reply. He handed the nearly finished wooden duck to Kayla and gave her a wink. The little girl hugged it like it was gold. Lucas didn't know why he kept watching the man. Maybe because everyone else at Meadow Hills made him feel invisible. Raymond looked at the kids like they were the whole sky. Not burdens, not statistics. Just kids. One rainy afternoon, Lucas worked up the courage to approach the gate. Raymond was sitting on his usual bench, soaking wet but cheerful. "Hi," Lucas said shyly. Raymond looked up, smiled warmly. "Hey there." Lucas eyed the tote beside him. "Got cookies today?" Crumbled oatmeal raisin, Raymond whispered. Still good. Lucas hesitated. Even if I don't have braids. Raymond laughed, a rich, honest laugh that made Lucas's chest ache in a way he didn't understand. I'll make an exception. He handed over a napkin-wrapped bundle. Lucas took it and sat beside him on the wet step, ignoring the rain. What's your name? Raymond asked. Lucas. Good name. You don't talk much, do you? Lucas shrugged. Talking doesn't change anything here. Raymond nodded slowly. No, I suppose it doesn't. But sometimes, listening does. What no one knew, especially not Veronica, was that Raymond had been donating anonymously to Meadow Hills for years. Each month, a 5-figure check was wired from the Evelyn Hope Fund, named after his mother. He never attached his name, never asked for recognition. He just wanted to help, quietly, with dignity. When Veronica took over the center 5 years ago, he noticed the changes immediately. Fewer classes, no tutors, kids thinner, sadder, silent. He started visiting to see for himself. What he saw broke his heart. But he stayed quiet, not because he was powerless, but because power, he'd learned, was only useful when used wisely. So he watched, he listened, he took notes, and he waited. One day, Veronica cornered him behind the dining hall. You think you're some kind of savior, she hissed, coming around with your broken junk and stale snacks. Raymond looked her straight in the eye, not a flicker of emotion. I come here because no one else does. Veronica sneered. You're pathetic. He said nothing, but that night, back home in his modest cabin, Raymond opened a drawer filled with folders, each labeled with dates, photos, names. He added a new page. Lucas Reed, age 5, sleeping on floor, bruise on left cheek. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He was gathering truth, and one day he'd use it. Lucas didn't know any of this. To him, Raymond was just a man with cookies that crumbled too easily, and a voice that never shouted. He was the only grown-up who looked at him without expecting something in return. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first piece of hope Lucas had seen in a long, long time. The first snow came early that year. The snow had been falling since before dawn. By midday, the world outside Meadow Hills was blanketed in white, soft, heavy, muffling the usual creaks and cries that haunted the center's hallways. Inside, however, the cold had crept past the rotting window frames and loose door seams, settling into every corner like a silent invader. Room 7 felt colder than usual. The little heater by the door sputtered weakly, doing its best, but Lucas could still see his breath as he lay curled under the thin blanket. His fingers, red and stiff, clutched the photo of his parents beneath the fabric. He hadn't eaten much that day. Breakfast was cold oatmeal. Lunch was a dry sandwich he couldn't finish. Dinner hadn't come yet. Veronica had been in a bad mood. Someone broke a light bulb in the hallway, and everyone was being punished for it. Lucas didn't cry anymore. He just waited. From the frosted window of the common room, he saw movement out near the back courtyard, just beyond the rusting fence. It was Raymond. He was hunched low, balancing awkwardly on a rickety stool, one hand gripping the edge of the building for balance, while the other hammered something along the bottom of the wooden access door that led to the basement. Lucas pressed his face to the glass, breath fogging the surface. The wind whipped snow in every direction, catching in Raymond's hair, coating his shoulders in white. His fingers were bare, and his knuckles were red, raw from cold and work. There was no staff around, no one helping. No one had asked him to fix the broken door. But there he was, patching it anyway, trying to keep the wind from blowing straight into the basement where some of the younger kids slept. Lucas looked down at the scarf around his own neck. It was the only one he had, a faded, olive-green knit scarf that had once belonged to his dad. It was too long for him, so he looped it around twice when he wore it. It was the warmest thing he owned. And right now, Raymond looked colder than anyone he'd ever seen. Lucas didn't think. He just moved. He slipped out the back hallway, careful not to make noise that might alert Veronica, out the side exit, down the icy steps, into the wind. Raymond didn't notice him at first, not until Lucas tugged gently at the hem of his coat. The man looked down, startled. "Lucas, you're shaking," the boy said, barely above a whisper. Before Raymond could respond, Lucas pulled the scarf from around his neck and reached up, his small fingers trembling as he tried to loop it around Raymond's collar. It smelled like winter and dust and boyhood. Raymond stood frozen for a moment, not from the cold, but from something else, something deeper. He looked at the boy's face, so serious, so calm, despite the snow pelting his cheeks, and felt something inside him fracture. "Lucas," he said gently, "you didn't have to, oh." "I wanted to," Lucas cut in. "Why?" Lucas looked up at him with eyes too old for 5 years. "Because you're the only grown-up here who doesn't yell at me." The words hung in the air. Raymond blinked, once, twice. Then he bent down slowly, steadying himself with a hand on the wall until he was eye level with the boy. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. "That means more than you know." They sat on the low brick edge of the garden wall, snow collecting on their shoulders, neither speaking for a long time. The scarf still hung around Raymond's neck, and Lucas's ears were already red from the wind. But he didn't care. "Can I ask something?" Lucas said at last. "Of course." "Why do you come here?" Raymond smiled faintly. "Because someone very important to me used to come here too." "Who?" "My mum," he said, eyes drifting toward the trees beyond the fence. "Her name was Evelyn. She used to volunteer here when I was around your age. Back then it wasn't called Meadow Hills. It was smaller, warmer. She'd bring books, paint the walls, sit with kids who didn't talk much. Like me." "Exactly like you." Lucas's brow furrowed. "Was she nice?" "She was light," Raymond said softly. "When she walked into a room, people stood up straighter, not because they were scared, but because they wanted to be better. She believed every kid deserved to be seen, to be safe, to be loved." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Do you miss her?" Raymond nodded. "Every day." "Me too," Lucas whispered. "I mean, I miss my mum and dad. Sometimes I can't remember what their voices sounded like. I try really hard. But it's like they're fading." Raymond's eyes stung, and not from the cold. "That's the cruel thing about grief, Lucas. It tries to make you forget love, so you don't hurt anymore. But love deserves to be remembered." Lucas turned his face away, blinking fast. "I don't like it here." "I know," Raymond said. "It's not how things should be." "Can I stay with you?" Lucas asked suddenly, voice cracking. "Just for a little while? I won't eat much." Raymond looked down at him, heart shattering. "I wish I could take you with me right now," he said honestly. "But it's complicated. Grown-up, complicated." Lucas didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, then tucked his hands under his armpits to stay warm. Raymond stood and took off his coat. He wrapped it around Lucas's shoulders. The boy gasped. "You'll freeze." "I'm old," Raymond said, smiling. "I've had enough warmth in my life. You need more." That night, back in room 7, Lucas fell asleep with the coat folded over his blanket. He didn't care if the staff took it in the morning. For the first time in weeks, the cold didn't reach his bones. And for the first time in months, he dreamed of something that wasn't grey or silent. He dreamed of ducks and strawberry cookies and a woman named Evelyn who used to believe every child deserved love. The photo had always been with him. Lucas kept it tucked inside the front flap of his backpack, wrapped carefully in a sandwich bag to protect it from moisture. It wasn't anything special. A little 4x6 print, creased in the corner, the colors faded with time. But to Lucas, it was his whole world. In it, his mum and dad stood in front of the little blue house they used to live in. His mum was laughing, her head tilted back slightly, and his dad had an arm around her waist, and the other hoisting Lucas, just a baby at the time, on his hip. Lucas didn't remember the moment, but he liked to think it had been a good day. Everyone looked so happy. He only took the photo out at night, under the blanket, when he was sure the other kids were asleep. It made him feel closer to them, like they hadn't really gone, like he could still reach them somehow, if he just stared hard enough. That afternoon, Lucas felt brave enough to share something he never had before. Raymond had managed to sneak into the laundry room, one of the few places without cameras, to fix a busted dryer that had been sparking for weeks. Lucas, who had been assigned to folding towels, sat nearby, watching as the older man crouched with a wrench and a flashlight. They spoke quietly. Lucas liked talking to Raymond in places like this. It felt safe, hidden. "Did you always fix things?" Lucas asked. Raymond smiled. "Since I was young. I used to take apart radios just to see if I could put them back together." "Did your dad teach you?" Raymond paused. "Number. But I had a friend who did." Lucas tilted his head. "What was he like?" "He was loud," Raymond said with a soft laugh, "and loyal, smarter than he gave himself credit for. We went through college together, built stupid inventions in our dorm room, stayed up arguing about music and politics. He was the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered, even when the world didn't." Lucas liked that. He liked hearing about people who made the world feel softer. As Raymond returned to tightening the bolts, Lucas reached into his backpack for the photo. He wanted to show Raymond what his dad looked like. He hadn't done that before, not with anyone. "I have a picture," Lucas said quietly, "of my parents." Raymond turned, wiping his hands on an old rag. "You do?" Lucas pulled the photo from its plastic bag and handed it over, careful not to bend the edges. Raymond took it in his hands and froze. At first, Lucas thought something was wrong. Raymond's face had gone pale, his eyes wide and locked on the image. He stared at it for a long time, unmoving. "Mr. Raymond?" Lucas asked, unsure. But Raymond didn't answer. He slowly sank onto the edge of the folding table, still holding the photo, as if it were a ghost. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Is that your dad?" Lucas nodded. His name was Adam Reed. Raymond closed his eyes. A name he hadn't heard in almost 15 years. But how could he forget? Adam Reed, the loud, loyal friend with the crooked grin and endless ideas. The roommate who fixed his broken laptop with a spoon and a rubber band. The best man at his wedding. The one who held his shoulder the night his mother died. They had drifted apart after college. Life got in the way. Jobs, relocations, unanswered calls. Raymond had meant to reach out again. He always did. And now, he was too late. His best friend was gone, and his son, his only son, was sitting in front of him, 5 years old and alone in the coldest place imaginable. Raymond looked up slowly. Lucas was watching him, uncertain. "You knew my dad?" the boy asked. Raymond hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to scoop the boy into his arms and say, "Of course I did, kid. He was one of the best people I've ever known. And if he were here, he'd never let you end up in a place like this." But he couldn't. Not yet. Not with Veronica watching every hallway. Not with rules that forbade unsupervised contact with non-staff adults. Not with consequences that might get Lucas punished, or worse. So instead, He offered a soft smile and handed the photo back. "I think he would have been very proud of you." Lucas nodded and tucked the picture away. Raymond didn't speak for a long while after that. From that moment on, something shifted. Raymond became more protective, more attentive. He noticed things faster, like when Lucas started coughing but didn't complain, or when the boy's socks had holes in them and he tried to hide it. The next day, a new pair appeared, stuffed under the bunk mattress. Lucas began to seek him out more often too, careful not to draw attention. They met in quiet corners, in brief moments stolen during chore rotations or after meals. They didn't talk about the photo again. But something unspoken passed between them now, an understanding, a thread woven in grief and memory. Raymond kept his promise to stay quiet. But behind the scenes, he began digging, pulling out old documents, university photos, scanning for proof, for connections. The more he learned, the clearer it became. This wasn't just any boy he was trying to help. This was Adam's boy, his friend's son, his godson, though the papers had never been made official, the child of the man who once called him brother, and he was rotting away in a place that treated children like problems to manage, instead of people to love. Raymond tightened his grip on his notepad that night as he walked home through the snow. He had names now, dates, evidence, and something more important, a reason that ran deeper than duty, deeper than charity. He was going to save Lucas, and this time he wouldn't be too late. One Saturday afternoon, Raymond arrived earlier than usual. He had just stepped onto the property when he heard shouting coming from the back courtyard. "Useless brat! You've ruined my clothes. Do you even realize that?" He froze. That was Veronica's voice. He quickly moved toward the yard, where the late afternoon sun cast harsh shadows over a patch of bare dirt. What he saw made the blood in his veins turn cold. Lucas, his face smeared with blood and mud, knees pressed into the sand, hands trembling, was sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. His small button-up shirt was torn, a fresh bruise swelling on his cheek. Veronica knelt in front of him, pointing a rigid finger at his face, screaming, "You think anyone's going to feel sorry for you crying like that? Pathetic! Kids like you are disgusting!" Lucas could only shake his head, tears mixing with dirt, running in dark streaks down his chin. He hiccuped, trying to say something, but no sound came out. Raymond stood still for a few seconds, then stepped forward. "Stop." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a storm. Veronica spun around. "What are you doing here? This is not—" I said, "Stop." "Right. Now." Raymond took another step, placing himself between her and the boy. "The child is bleeding, and what you're doing is beyond cruel." Veronica narrowed her eyes. He fell. "I'm teaching him some manners." Raymond didn't move. "I've held my tongue long enough. In one more minute, you won't have the chance to teach anyone ever again." Lucas, shaking, clutched the hem of Raymond's coat. Raymond knelt, lifting him gently into his arms, hands trembling with fury. Blood was trickling from the boy's forehead and elbow, his clothes crumpled, his heartbeat pounding against Raymond's chest like a silent cry for help. Raymond had always known Meadow Hills was broken, but now he had reason to believe it was rotten to the core. After witnessing what Lucas went through, he couldn't unsee the cracks. What used to be quiet observations became pointed questions in his mind. What used to be instinct was now urgency. The boy wasn't just another forgotten face in a system that chewed up children. He was family, and Raymond had already lost too much. He started by watching, quietly, patiently. He changed his visits, coming earlier, staying later. He took careful mental notes, which doors stayed locked, which children flinched when certain staff members passed by, which donation boxes mysteriously disappeared from the supply room before ever being opened. He noticed the storage garage in the back lot, where children were marched in groups twice a week to sort, clean, and repack overflow donations. He saw 10-year-olds folding designer coats and polishing kitchenware, sweating under adult supervision, then returning to dinner with bruised fingers and empty stomachs. He heard whispers in the halls. "Don't break anything, or they'll make you skip dinner again." Last week, Timmy tripped and dropped a bag of toys. They locked him in the linen closet overnight. "I think Mrs. Veronica sold the tablets. They were here last month, and now they're gone." At first it sounded like rumors, exaggerations. Then he saw it for himself. It was late one Tuesday when Raymond doubled back to retrieve a toolbox he'd forgotten in the back hallway. The center was mostly quiet, staff off duty, children tucked away in their rooms. But as he passed the door near the maintenance closet, he heard a sound. Sniffling. He paused. Then a faint knock. 3 weak taps. He followed the sound and found the small linen storage room locked from the outside. He crouched beside the door and spoke softly. "Who's in there?" A pause. Then a voice, barely audible. "Marisol." Raymond's heart stopped. Marisol was 7, small, quiet. She liked to braid dandelions into bracelets. Her eye had been swollen that morning. He checked the knob. Locked. "Why are you in here?" "I broke the blanket," she whispered. "Mrs. Bloom said I didn't deserve to sleep like the others." Raymond stood frozen for a moment, anger coursing through him. She had been in there for nearly 2 days. That night, he went home and opened the drawer he had kept locked for years. Inside were things from another life, old security consulting badges, spare microphones, and 2 thumb-sized cameras no bigger than shirt buttons. He charged them overnight. The next morning, he taped one under the main hallway's fire extinguisher box, angled toward the front office. The second went inside a supply cabinet near the basement playroom, facing the direction where staff often shouted and dragged kids for discipline. He also began carrying a small digital recorder in his pocket, wrapped in cloth to mute outside rustling. Whenever Veronica walked past, barking orders or muttering threats under her breath, he recorded everything. He didn't ask for help. He didn't trust anyone else. 2 weeks into his silent investigation, Raymond struck gold. While volunteering to help rewire the storage computer, he was left alone in the administrative office for 20 minutes. He opened the locked filing cabinet. He'd watched the staff code it in the reflection of a mirror days earlier and found the ledger files. The numbers didn't add up. Receipts for educational enrichment from companies that didn't exist. Invoices for tutoring hours that had never happened. Inventory logs showing 30 new blankets distributed to children, while kids like Marisol were still sleeping on mats with holes. Raymond photographed every page with his old phone. Later that night, he cross-checked the names. Some companies were dissolved years ago. Others belonged to shell corporations tied to Veronica's maiden name. She was laundering donations, stealing from the very children she paraded in front of donors with fake smiles and over-rehearsed stories. But what broke him wasn't the fraud. It was the footage. Late one night, reviewing camera recordings on his laptop, he saw it. Veronica yanking a child's arm so hard they stumbled to the ground. When the boy cried out, she slapped him, not once, but twice, and hissed, "Cry again, and I'll make sure you sleep outside." The boy was no older than 6. Raymond paused the video, rewound, watched it again. He sat in silence for nearly an hour afterward, his knuckles white around his coffee mug. No more waiting, no more notes. It was time to act. The next day, he sent anonymous copies of the footage and financial records to 2 places, a friend at the local paper who owed him a favor, and a non-profit child advocacy lawyer known for taking down entire institutions. But he didn't stop there. He kept collecting. He wanted enough evidence that no excuse, no spin, no PR apology could bury it. Meanwhile, he kept visiting Lucas, but more carefully. They still met in quiet corners, shared soft words over bruised apples or broken cookies. Raymond never let on what he'd found. He didn't want to scare the boy, but Lucas seemed to sense something had changed. "You look tired," the boy said one evening. Raymond smiled. "That's because I'm carrying a secret." Lucas blinked. "Is it a good secret?" Raymond thought for a moment. "It will be. Soon." And so, beneath the snow and silence of Meadow Hills, a quiet resistance was growing. Not with protests, not with fire, but with cameras, with evidence, with truth. Veronica Bloom had built her kingdom on a lie. Raymond was about to burn it to the ground, with facts, not fury. And this time, the children would be heard. The storm came in fast, thick clouds rolling over the hills like an army, lightning cracking against the sky like warning shots. By late afternoon, rain was pounding the roof of Meadow Hills in sheets, flooding the parking lot and streaking the windows in jagged trails. Inside, the children were restless. Rain always made them anxious. It drowned out the sounds of footsteps, made it harder to predict where Veronica might appear next. Lucas had been assigned to sort a box of donated books in the lobby. They were old, musty, and heavy. He stacked them carefully, as he always did. He'd gotten good at moving quietly, precisely. But his arms were small, and the box was taller than he could see over. As he turned, the top stack wobbled. Before he could stop it, the books tumbled to the floor with a loud crash. Veronica appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by the sound. "What did you do?" she hissed, storming toward him. I didn't mean to. I was just..." Slap. The sound echoed off the walls. Lucas stumbled backward, his cheek stinging, the taste of metal rising in his mouth. "You ungrateful little rat," she spat, grabbing him by the collar. "You think this is a playground? These were donation books. Do you have any idea how much those are worth?" "I'll pick them up," Lucas whispered, eyes wide with shock. But she didn't let him. Instead, she dragged him down the hallway, past the cafeteria, past the sleeping quarters, toward the far storage wing. The lights flickered from the storm, casting jagged shadows. She stopped in front of a rusted metal door. "This is what happens when you act like an animal," she said. Before Lucas could respond, she shoved him inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a clang, followed by the sound of a heavy lock turning. It was pitch black. The air was cold and smelled like mildew and old cleaning chemicals. The walls were made of concrete, and the only thing inside was a broken mop bucket and a few stacked crates. There was no window, no light, no food, no water, no one. Lucas sat in the darkness, hugging his knees to his chest. His skin burned where she'd slapped him. His hands trembled. He wasn't sure how long he'd been in there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The storm outside howled louder than his thoughts. Elsewhere, across town, Raymond was pulling into his driveway when he realized something was missing. His notebook, the one with everything, dates, times, names, video logs. It wasn't in the passenger seat, wasn't in the back. Panic surged in his chest as he replayed his last steps. The storage room. He must have left it on the table while helping fix the power strip. Without a second thought, he turned the car around. It was nearly 9 p.m. when Raymond pulled back into the darkened Meadow Hills lot. The building was quiet. All lights inside were dimmed, only the faint orange glow of emergency exit signs flickering faintly through the rain-streaked windows. As he stepped out of the car, he saw movement, a shadow near the side hedge. "Mr. Raymond," a voice whispered. He turned. It was Jonah, a lanky 11-year-old with nervous eyes. He'd spoken to Raymond a few times, usually about broken toys or loose shoe soles. "What are you doing out here?" Raymond asked. "I saw you coming back." I think something's wrong with Lucas." Raymond stiffened. "What do you mean?" "She took him. Ms. Bloom, after he dropped the books, she hit him. Then she dragged him toward the supply wing. We haven't seen him since." Raymond's breath caught. "Are you sure?" Jonah nodded. "She only takes kids there when she's really mad." Raymond didn't ask more. He bolted. The storage hallway was freezing. Thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the vents. The smell of mold was stronger here, acrid and sour. He checked the doors, one by one. Most were unlocked, revealing only cleaning supplies and stacked folding chairs. Then he reached the metal door at the end, locked. He leaned in, held his breath, and then he heard it. A soft, broken sob. "Lucas?" "Nothing." "Lucas, it's me, Raymond. Are you in there?" A pause, then a choked whisper. "Cold." Raymond's heart exploded. He grabbed the knob again and yanked hard. It didn't budge. "Hold on, buddy," he said aloud, backing up. "I'm getting you out." He scanned the hallway, grabbed a broom handle from the wall hook, and wedged it into the lock. It cracked but didn't give. Second try. He kicked the handle. Sparks flew. The lock snapped. He pulled the door open with a groan of rusted metal, and what he saw inside nearly dropped him to his knees. Lucas was curled in the far corner of the room, knees tucked to his chest, lips blue. His face was wet, maybe from tears, maybe from the cold. His arms trembled uncontrollably. Raymond rushed forward, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around the boy. "Oh, God," he breathed. "You're freezing. I've got you now. You're safe." Lucas barely moved, but when Raymond touched his face, the boy flinched. "No more yelling," he murmured. "I'm not yelling," Raymond said, voice cracking. "I'd never yell at you." He scooped the boy into his arms, shielding him from the storm, and carried him down the hallway, every step echoing like a heartbeat of rage. By the time he reached the front office, Raymond was shaking, but not from the cold. He kicked the door open and shouted into the empty lobby, "Someone call 911!" The sirens arrived before the rain stopped. By the time the first patrol car pulled into the muddy lot of Meadow Hills, Raymond was standing at the front doors, soaked to the skin, holding Lucas in his arms. The boy was wrapped in blankets the night nurse had finally retrieved, his body still trembling from cold and fear. Raymond's face was tight with fury, jaw clenched, every muscle in his back aching from adrenaline and rage. "This center is abusing children," he said, before the officer even asked a question. "And I have proof." In the emergency room, while Lucas was being treated for mild hypothermia and bruising, Raymond made calls, dozens of them. First, to Detective Ward, a longtime friend who now worked with the city's Child Protection Unit. Then to Janice Liu, the civil rights attorney known statewide for tearing apart foster care corruption cases. And finally, to the Oakbridge Sentinel, the local paper Raymond once quietly donated to during its bankruptcy scare. They owed him. Now was the time to collect. By morning, the evidence Raymond had spent months compiling, video footage, audio recordings, fraudulent ledgers, had been duplicated and sent to every relevant authority. Within 24 hours, Meadow Hills was no longer a place of silence. The Oakbridge Sentinel ran a front-page headline in bold black letters, "Horror behind closed doors. Meadow Hills accused of child abuse and fraud." The story exploded. Photos of bruised children, testimonies from former staff, screenshots from security footage. One clip showed Veronica dragging a crying boy down the hall. Another showed boxes labeled "for donation" being loaded into a private van registered under her cousin's name. Then came the financial records, hundreds of thousands of dollars donated by churches, non-profits, and even the mayor's annual Christmas drive funneled into non-existent programs and dummy corporations. Raymond's folder had everything: tax filings, falsified receipts, mismatched inventory logs, bank transactions in Veronica's name. The public outcry was immediate. Within 72 hours, Veronica Bloom was arrested outside her country club gym, still in tennis shoes and a zip-up hoodie. The image of her being handcuffed by 2 officers became a symbol, shared across social media with captions like, "Finally." She starved kids and stole from them. No more hiding behind good PR. She was charged with 5 felony counts: child endangerment, aggravated assault of a minor, unlawful confinement, fraudulent misuse of charitable funds, tax evasion and embezzlement. During her arraignment, Veronica pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer blamed stress, management challenges, and a vendetta from a bitter old man with no children. But no one was buying it. Not this time. The Department of Child Services launched an emergency investigation. Within 2 days, Meadow Hills was officially closed, and all 37 children were transferred to vetted, state-run homes or licensed foster care facilities. A mobile therapy unit was deployed to provide immediate trauma counseling. The children, some quiet, others too numb to speak, were finally held, fed, and listened to. Raymond visited the facility where Lucas had been placed temporarily. The boy was quiet, still weak, but when he saw Raymond, his eyes lit up. "You said it was going to be a good secret," he whispered. Raymond knelt beside him, and it was. The town of Oakbridge wasn't large, but it had a long memory. For years, Meadow Hills had been praised as a humble haven for the forgotten. Veronica Bloom had spoken at charity luncheons, hosted galas, accepted community awards. She had shaken hands with politicians, dressed children in clean uniforms just for donor visits. Now, those same politicians scrambled to distance themselves. The mayor issued a public statement condemning her actions. Several board members of local charities resigned in shame. One prominent business leader admitted, "We never looked closely enough." And that makes us guilty too. What Raymond didn't expect was how many people thanked him. Strangers stopped him in grocery stores. Parents mailed him letters. Former foster kids, now grown, wrote long emails recounting the same abuse from other places, other systems. Some had never told anyone. But now they said, "If you could speak up, maybe I can too." It didn't make things right, but it cracked the wall. In the weeks that followed, an emergency community board was formed to re-evaluate every private group home in the region. Grants were redirected, new safeguards were implemented, whistleblower protections were strengthened. Janice Liu, the attorney, called Raymond one morning with a rare note of awe in her voice. "You know," she said, "I've worked on a lot of cases. But this might actually change something." Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't want to change the world. I just wanted to change one boy's world." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. As for Veronica Bloom, her trial was scheduled for the following spring. Prosecutors expected a conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. Public sentiment was unforgiving. She faced up to 35 years in prison. But for Lucas and the children like him, justice wasn't about the sentence. It was about being believed. It was about someone finally saying, "What happened to you wasn't okay, and it wasn't your fault." The first thing Lucas saw when he opened his eyes was a ceiling he didn't recognize. It was smooth, off-white, lit softly by afternoon sun filtering through blinds, not peeling, not stained, not buzzing with flickering lights. For a moment, he wasn't sure he was awake, or if this was just another dream, the kind he always woke up from shivering. Then came the smell, clean linens, antiseptic, and something else, cinnamon. He turned his head slightly, His body ached in strange places, and his throat was dry. But he could move. He could breathe. He wasn't locked in the dark anymore. A figure sat in the corner, slouched in a chair too small for him, fast asleep. Raymond. When Lucas shifted, the man stirred. "Hey there," Raymond said softly, rubbing his face. "You're awake." Lucas blinked. "I thought you left." "Never," Raymond replied. "I just stayed quiet so you could rest." Lucas opened his mouth to ask 100 questions, but only one came out. "Am I safe now?" Raymond leaned forward and nodded. "Yes, kiddo, you're safe, and you're not going back." The next few days passed slowly. Doctors came and went. Nurses smiled more than they needed to. Lucas was fed warm food he didn't have to fight for. And Raymond, he stayed, every hour, every meal, reading aloud old adventure books, drawing with crayons, even letting Lucas cut his sandwich in half because hospital food needed better geometry. But the biggest moment came when 2 reporters showed up with cameras. Raymond stood beside Lucas's bed, one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other holding a statement. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't planning to speak publicly," he began, "but I believe silence has protected the wrong people long enough." He took a breath. "My name is Raymond Ellis. I am the founder of the Evelyn Hope Foundation, named after my late mother. For over a decade, I've supported children's shelters and transitional homes across this state, including Meadow Hills." The room fell silent. I chose to remain anonymous so the work could speak louder than my name. But today, that changes, because today, I'm not here as a philanthropist. He turned to Lucas. "I'm here as someone who made a promise to a friend who died too young, and as someone who watched a child fall through the cracks of a system built to protect him." Then he looked back to the cameras, eyes fierce but steady. "Today, I am not adopting a boy. I am simply bringing him back to where he always belonged, family." Later that night, when the cameras were gone and the hospital quiet again, Lucas turned to Raymond. "Did you really mean that?" he asked. "Every word." Lucas was silent for a long time. Then, in the smallest voice, "Can I call you Dad?" Raymond froze. Then gently, he reached out and squeezed Lucas's hand. "I would be honored." 1 year later, the cabin was small but filled with light. Windows overlooked the woods. Wind chimes danced on the porch. Chickens clucked somewhere out back. And inside, the scent of pancakes drifted through the kitchen, mixing with the sound of jazz from an old radio. At the table, Lucas, now 6, taller, stronger, and smiling more, dipped his toast into a pool of syrup and kicked his feet back and forth under the bench. "Don't forget your backpack," Raymond called from the stove. "I packed it last night." "Oh yeah? With what?" "Markers. And the good kind of paper, not napkins." Raymond grinned. "That's my boy." Lucas now went to a school where he was allowed to dream. He painted dragons, wrote poems about clouds, made a new best friend named Jacob who liked frogs and made fart noises during spelling tests. He also slept in a real bed, under a roof that didn't leak, in a room where he could tape his drawings on the wall. He still had nightmares sometimes, but now, when he woke up crying, there was always someone to hold him until he fell asleep again. That summer, Raymond reopened Meadow Hills, but it wasn't Meadow Hills anymore. He changed everything. The name, the staff, the mission. Now it was simply called Happy, a place with real classrooms, gardens the kids helped plant, warm meals, soft pillows, art therapy, bookshelves, a rule that every child must be greeted by name, and no locks on doors that didn't need them. Every child got to choose a color for their blanket. Every hallway had drawings on the walls, and on the biggest wall of all, in the main gathering room, hung a framed painting, messy, beautiful, full of emotion. It was Lucas's, a watercolor scene. A little boy, small but sturdy, standing in the rain. Beside him, an old man with a crooked back and kind eyes, holding an umbrella over them both. The boy's hand reached up, and the man's reached down. Above them, a shaft of sunlight broke through the grey clouds. A single line, painted in yellow crayon, curved along the bottom edge. "You didn't yell at me, you stayed." There are stories that stay with us, not because they're grand or heroic, but because they remind us of something deeply human. That sometimes the strongest kind of love is the quiet kind. The kind that shows up when no one else does. The kind that wraps a worn-out scarf around a shivering child and whispers, "You're safe now." Lucas's story isn't just about survival. It's about what it means to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved, not because you're perfect, but simply because you exist. Raymond didn't step into Lucas's life to be a hero. He didn't offer charity. He didn't try to fix everything overnight. He listened. He stayed. And in doing so, he became the one thing no system could ever replace: family. This story also reminds us that monsters don't always look like villains in the dark. Sometimes they wear blazers and smile for charity galas. Sometimes the most dangerous places are the ones we're told to trust. But even in the bleakest corners of the world, there can be someone watching, someone who chooses to care, even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes that's enough to turn everything around. So now, we turn the question to you. Have you ever met someone who changed your life simply by being there? Do you think true family has to be blood-related? Or is it something we build, moment by moment, through love and loyalty? If you saw someone like Lucas, quiet, hurting, invisible, would you speak up? Would you stay? And most importantly, do you believe a small act of kindness can save a life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your kindness matters. And maybe, just maybe, by talking about stories like this, we remind the world that hope doesn't come from systems or titles. It comes from people who stay, people who listen, people who action. Thank you so much for watching. Your time, your heart, and your voice mean more than you know. We hope this story stayed with you the way it stayed with us.